Hey everyone, thanks for coming and watching another of my videos, Comics with Drew, and I am Drew, and I typically like to draw. So I've been drawing webcomics for about 20 years or so, and I thought I would do a series of videos on some of the tips I've learned and some of the methods I use for creating my webcomics. So the primary webcomic I've drawn is called Vindabud Superhero in Training. I no longer really update that site anymore because I'm working on an original comic book graphic novel, which is going to use some of those characters, and it's going to be kind of like a reboot of those characters. So, but today I wanted to do a tutorial on how to do word balloons or dialogue balloons. I know this is difficult for some people, and it's vexing to try to figure out how to do it right. But this is how I do it. So I'm using Adobe Photoshop here. This is a raster-based image program. So I do know that a lot of professional letterers will use Illustrator, and they do that because it's vector-based and they can easily resize dialogue and fonts with a lot more flexibility. But since we're talking about webcomics here, we're going to do just a quick solution, and since we have usually low fidelity graphics here, we're talking about 72 dpi, this should work just fine. Now, when I usually do my comics, I make them in 300 dpi in the event that I'm ever going to get them printed, which I'm actually working on doing possibly here shortly. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But for purposes of this, 72 dpi is fine. So you can open up a new document, make it whatever size you want it to be, but you're working on your own webcomic, so you know what the dimensions are going to be. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the tools that we're going to use. So we're going to use the elliptical tool for selection. And I like to create two different layers here. You'll see a balloon layer, a layer 1. The layer 1 is going to be the background. The balloon layer is going to be where we're actually going to draw our balloon. So the first thing we want to do is draw an ellipse like so. Okay, so typical ellipse, and this is going to contain our dialogue. And then we're going to use the polygonal selection tool here, right up here. And we're going to hold shift, and then we're going to draw a tail for the balloon. And this gives you a nice sharp tail. So obviously our character would be over here who's speaking, and this tail would be pointing directly to them. Next thing you want to do is you want to fill it in. Now most word balloons have borders, so the way that I like to do this quick and dirty, and it works perfectly for my applications, and it could for you as well, it's up to you. But I'll go ahead and hit the paint bucket tool, and we'll make it foreground, normal, 100% tolerance, and we are not going to keep this anti-alias because this is going to be like the render part. And we're going to go ahead and select black here because I want a black border, and we'll just drop that in there 100%, and that gives us a black word balloon. But now we want to put now you can use this if you want to use for like spooky dialogue, and you put alternate colored fonts in here, like white or red if you want to have like a spooky thing or whatnot, or you want to show an intonation of malice, or however you want to do that, that's fine. But for right now, we're doing a regular word balloon with regular dialogue. So we're going to go and hit selection here, and we're going to modify the selection, and then we're going to contract. And I typically contract by 5 pixels, but you can play with it and see which one works best for you. But that'll give me a little bit, that gives an automatic border here. So now we'll go ahead and select the alternate fill-in color for the balloon. In this case, I use white, and we're going to go with the paint bucket tool, and there we go again. And so then Command D or Control D, I believe, if you're using Windows. Now you have a white dialogue balloon with a black background. Now, next thing you want to do is obviously get your dialogue. So we're going to do an example of this. I'm going to show you how this works in a panel from one of my Vindabud comics. And by the way, this balloon is ready to go, and this obviously is not in a particular panel, but this is typically how you would create that. So again, ellipse tool, create an ellipse, polygonal lasso tool, hold down the shift key to add to the selection, and then just draw a triangle going wherever you want it to go, and then that will give you the tail. Then fill it in again with a solid color, reduce the selection by select, modify, contract, by however many pixels you want to reduce it by, and then just fill in with the alternate color, and there you have a bordered word balloon. So this is a panel here where Vindabud is very upset. He is upset that his hair that he's a big fan of keeps losing to the tortoise. And so here at this panel on the left, he has finally decided in his mind why the tortoise keeps beating the hare, which he comes up with very convoluted, not necessarily accurate take on science. And then he shouts at his bust that he has of Albert Einstein, that Einstein hasn't beaten him yet. So inferring that Vindabud is somehow in a competition of IQ and intelligence with Einstein, and that is a specious argument to say the least. So first what we're going to do here is we're going to type in the dialogue. So I'm going to give you another layer. Now dialogue usually just starts when you use the text tool. It gives you another layer to begin with. So I'm going to actually make this a colorful font just to make it stand out for purposes of just viewing it. So we need to make sure that the dialogue fits. Okay. So in this particular case, the dialogue that I have is he's slow as dirt to the point that he exceeds the speed of light. So we're going to go ahead and select here, and we're going to actually make that left justified by using the font tool up here. I'm using CrimeFighter BB. This is a Blambot font. It is free for usage for independent web cartoonists. It's a very good website, Blambot. I highly recommend that you go there and check out this font and any other fonts that you might want to use. You can purchase them for commercial purposes, or you can just use them for free. The gentleman who runs that is on Twitter, and I think it's he's got @Blambot is his Twitter handle. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but his first name is Nate, and I think actually I'm going to try it. His last name is Pecos or Picos. I'm not sure, but Nate Picos of Blambot created this font. Recommend that you use it if you like superhero font stuff like I do. So anyway, so I've got the font, and so now I'm going to go ahead and type out the dialogue, and I'm going to use lowercase because this is an all caps font. He's slow as dirt to the point that he exceeds the speed of light. All right. So now we need to make this fit in this panel. So we're going to go ahead and select all of it, and then we're going to reduce the font size. Let's go with a 12. And now typically you're supposed to have your leading here, which is the space between the lines. You're supposed to have that at least 2 points above the font size, but I don't ever really do that myself personally because I think it just looks better when it's closer like this. Actually, maybe not so much. Usually maybe a point. I'll typically go with a point. Increase in the leading over the font size. So this looks like this would probably fit better as a centered thing of text here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And now, as you can see, there's not really a lot of room for a word balloon here. Let's take this down a little bit even further so we can just have a little bit of room to breathe for the dialogue. I'm actually just doing this from what I think from what I remember it looking like. I'm not actually looking at it directly. So again, since I lowered the font size, we're going to lower this so the font is 11, so we're going to make this 12. So there you go. Okay, so that kind of shows you the size of it. All right, so now we need to create a balloon here. So we're going to go ahead and just use our ellipsis tool, and we're going to find something that fits the size of the dialogue. So that looks like it would fit the size. Actually, let's make this a little bit larger and a little bit further over here. So yeah, let's you don't want your dialogue balloon to really overshadow your character. So we'll go with this. There we go. Okay, now we got a separate layer for balloons. Okay, and we're going to use the Polygonal Lasso tool, and we're going to go here, and we're going to point at Vindabud, our erstwhile superhero in training, and we're going to go ahead and fill this, and then we're going to select and modify, and we're going to contract. And actually, I'm going to bump this up. I'm going to bump this up to 6, and there we go. And then we're going to go ahead and fill this. Okay, and then we're going to drop this underneath the dialogue. Now you're probably thinking, wait a second, this looks terrible, and you're absolutely right. The reason this looks terrible is because the balloon is not fitting the panel. So we're going to draw a selection. Now usually I've got my borders separated from my art, but not in this particular example. So we're just going to select the area where that panel is going to be live, right? And then we're going to go up to that word balloon, and we're going to invert the selection. So that's going to be Shift Command I, or you can go up to select and then inverse. And then we're going to hit delete while we're on the balloon layer. This is actually a balloon layer here. Okay, and then we're going to hit delete. All right, and so then it's nice and trimmed. It fits just in there, just nice and snug. And we're going to change the font color to black. And so now at this point you can figure out, oh, is this going to work or not as far as the size. So we're going to actually reduce the size on this again even further. Let's see if 10 works. And what you want is you want to make sure that you give the font, the dialogue, some room to breathe. This is about as tight as you want to make it. So we're going to bring this back down to even 9 for purposes of this particular example. All right, that works a little bit better. And then I'm going to make this 10. Actually, you know, I think we can bump that up to 10 and make the leading 11. There you go. That's much better. Okay, so there you go. And that's typically how I would do it. I would tuck a word balloon into a smaller panel. Now, this one here is dialogue where he says, "You haven't beaten me yet." So this is actually going to be a more straightforward word balloon. So first of all, we're going to put our dialogue in here, and we'll go with black here because it'll stand out. You haven't beaten me yet. And now, because Vindabud typically is very, very excitable, we're going to make this a little bit larger, and we'll make that a 12-point font, and we'll go to our tools for selecting and modifying our characters, and we'll make that 13. There you go. And then we can close that. Now we got a nice little area where we can tuck in this word balloon, and we're going to draw an ellipsis that covers the size of the balloon. So this one's going to be a little bit offset as well, so we'll put that up here. All right, and then we're going to get our Polygonal selection tool, and we're going to draw a nice tail, and we want to make this a little bit thicker, I think, than the other one. And we're going to bring it all the way up into the window or into the ellipsis selection and let it go. And then again, I'm going to do a different layer for this particular balloon just for now. Now what you typically want to do is when you're still creating your balloons, put them on separate layers. And then once you've done with all the balloons and you like the way it is, you can flatten those layers to one balloon layer. But in this case, and that'll help you reduce the size of your file if that's a concern. But in this case, I'm just going to set for still working with it. I'm going to keep it in a different layer. All right, again, we're going to go with our paint bucket, and we're going to fill that in, and then we're going to go with our selection, and we're going to modify, and we're going to contract, and we're going to make that 6 again, and then we're going to switch to white, and then we're going to edit fill, and then we're going to hit deselect, and then again, because we're trying to fit this balloon in here, we're going to this cartoon actually has a larger part that goes above it, but for whatever reason I left a lot of blank space here because I was trying to be edgy with my design. Yep, not nearly as cool as I think I'm trying to be, but we're going to go ahead and also select this area to make this fit. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so I can get more precise selection. And we're going to do this, and we're going to drop that down to right about here. Here we go. And then we're going to delete that off the top. And then we're going to bring this under here, and this is where we adjust our text or our dialogue. So you haven't beaten me yet. So he's slow as dirt. Actually, we're going to move that over a little bit to the left here. I think that looks a little bit better. Maybe a little bit further down. There we go. He's slow as dirt to the point that he exceeds the speed of light. You haven't beaten me yet. Vindabud says Steinstein. And that's how you do word balloons. Quick and dirty in Photoshop, rasterized. Again, if you want to do professional lettering, I recommend that you use Illustrator or something or some other vector-based tool. And that gives you a lot more flexibility when lettering actual comic books. But for purposes of webcomics, I think that this does very nicely, and it's served me well. Again, thanks for watching. And if you want to see more of these videos, hit like and hit subscribe. And I'm also going to be talking about comics and Comicsgate and movies and stuff like that. And if you have any other ideas, or if you have any other questions about Photoshop or doing webcomics in general, feel free to mention it in the comments and as a suggestion, and I'll see if I can't make a video about it. Again, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.